Welcome to the Apostolate's Peace of Heart Forum Classic Series, where hundreds of key personalities in the Church share insights and wisdom from classic spiritual literature. These experts are interviewed by the Apostolate's founder from a unique family perspective, so that the spiritual insights shared can be applied to our everyday lives and give us peace of heart. Let's now join the discussion.
Hello, I'm Jerry Conacher. Just want to welcome you to this series now in St. Louis de Monfort, the Catechism of True Devotion to Mary. And this has been a very exciting series because we're really getting into a lot of the questions people have when we make this total consecration. We have Father Hugh Gillespie, a Monfort missionary, joining us today, and Father Bernard Geiger, a great Franciscan, member of our staff, my spiritual director. We're into this now with both feet, and we're at question number 20. Why does St. Louis de Monfort tell us to be slaves of Jesus and Mary when we should be their loving children?
That is one of the most common questions that one gets.
Yeah.
And again, the key here is the issue of that word, slavery.
Right.
As we said before, that word comes down to the issue of belonging. But to give ourselves a little context here, in John's Gospel as well, Jesus turns to his disciples, I no longer call you slaves, but friends. And so we say, well, shouldn't we call ourselves friends of Jesus? Monfort would say, of course we're friends of Jesus, and we're brothers and sisters of Jesus, and we're the children of God.
Right.
But Jesus himself also says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom. Right. Only that one who does the will of my Father.
Right.
What we're dealing with here in Monfort's use of the term slavery, because he does use the expression child, okay?
Yes, I see that.
And these are not mutually exclusive. It's not I'm either a slave or a child. The issue here that Monfort perceives very well is in that other statement of Jesus, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom, but only that one who does the will of my Father. Monfort here is talking about the dispositions of our wills and our persons. Who claims us? To whom do we belong? To what do we belong? Okay, that is why Monfort is saying here, recognize that you who are a child of God are also completely claimed by his kingdom. Okay? And it's this absolute belonging. And as we said before, this is mutual. Jesus takes the form of a slave to redeem us. Right. Mary completely gives herself to the saving movements of Christ. Mary and Jesus completely give themselves to us at our service. Right. Think about that. God places himself at our service in this peculiar way.
Beautiful.
Yes, and the word that Monfort uses for belonging then, and he's correct, is slavery because it talks about what claims dominion over our hearts. So when we're using slavery language, we're speaking about the lordship of Christ over our hearts, the queenship of Mary in our lives, and of our belonging completely to that reality.
Father Bernard, what are your insights?
And the point is, it's not a demeaning slavery. It is a slavery of love. And that kind of slavery lifts us up and makes us, it shows that we are responding to God's love of us, which is basically, he's making himself our slaves.
Right.
And we're responding and saying, yeah, I want to be your slave. So basically, it's an ennobling slavery. It lifts us up and makes us share in the very being of God. In other words, it constantly increases our sanctifying grace and makes us all the more God's children.
Right. Right. In fact, Monfort would go so far as to say, if I'm not the slave of Jesus, I'm not the child of God. And if I'm a child of God, I must be the slave of Christ. Because the only reason, okay, we call ourselves God's children not because we are created.
Right.
We call ourselves God's children truly because we have been redeemed and we share Jesus, something of Jesus' own relationship with his Father. In other words, Jesus gives himself so completely to me, I share his relationship with the Father. I share his relationship with Mary. I share his journey to the cross. Jesus is child of God and child of Mary. And so am I, and so are we. Not just children of God, but children of Mary. And
Yes.
Monfort insists on this. But
That's
this
true.
only comes because we completely are claimed by the life of Jesus. We completely belong to Jesus. Jesus purchased us with every drop of his blood.
Yes.
And so, in redeeming me from the slavery of the devil, he now claims dominion over my life. I am now the slave of Jesus. But this is the slavery that gives me the freedom of the children of God, because it's a complete and true belonging. And it's important to recognize here, Monfort talks about three kinds of slavery. There's the slavery we all have simply because God has made us. We all belong to God, like it or not.
Right. We're his creatures.
You know, we are not, I don't own this life. I didn't give it to myself. It was given to me. It was trusted to me. All things, in a sense, Monfort would say, are the slaves of God simply by virtue of his dominion over us. Right. Then there are those who are slaves by force. Even the demons, Monfort says, have to acknowledge the lordship of God. In the scriptures, they have to obey the word of Christ, but they don't like it.
Right.
That's coercive. They still obey. Jesus says, leave that person, and they go. It's obedient, but
Right.
it's grumbling.
Mm-hmm.
And then Monfort says there's a slavery of love, a slavery that's voluntary.
Yeah.
And this is the key here. This is the key. Jesus, who lovingly and voluntarily gives himself to me, asks that I lovingly and voluntarily give myself to him through his mother. This is the kind of slavery we're talking about. This is the one that acknowledges the reality I live
Right.
and embraces it. And so when Christ says, go, when Christ says, come, when Christ says, serve generously, I do it lovingly, not grumbling. Not because, and this is the key. What's the difference between the obedience of the demon and the obedience of the saint? Both will obey the same command. The difference is the internal disposition. Mm-hmm. One is done in pain and grumbling
Right.
and objecting as if it's an imposition.
Kicking and screaming.
Right, exactly. Like the spoiled child, if we want to keep with the child metaphor. The other is done willingly, gratefully, generously, and joyfully. And so there's a real freedom in the other. And this is the paradox. Monfort says, it's in this slavery that Christ found and won our freedom. And so it's in and through this belonging that we too obtain the freedom of the children of God. If we're not the slaves of Christ, we're not the children of God. If we're the children of God, we belong completely to Christ.